All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, as always. Hello, Drew. Today we're going to do pretty much all NFL. I'm going to close out with a little baseball tidbit, my favorite bet in baseball at the moment. I'll give my impassioned speech at the end of the show, but we're going to break down the NFC South in a second. But firstly, some news on the NFL front. Brock Purdy has been cleared to participate in on-field work, Drew. I don't understand this at all. I think I'm just on an island. I'm the only person who I know who has this opinion, but I don't understand how Trey Lance has just been completely written off and just thrown to the wolves. 12 months ago, it was Trey Lance is like a dark horse MVP candidate. He's going to be the next in that mold of Mahomes, Ryan Jackson, who comes from nowhere to win MVP. It's his team now. Jimmy's been benched. He's the third pick in the draft. He plays one game in a monsoon in Chicago, and then he breaks his ankle, and now he's just done. Like, I don't understand it at all. Like, they invested serious capital in him. I think you have to regress a bit back to the fact that Kyle Shanahan presumably is making the right decision based on everything that he's seeing in practice. But, I mean, what do you make of the Niners and Purdy and Lance and Donald?
Yeah, it's as confusing and as intriguing. Any kind of updates that you're going to get all throughout camp, this one is the one that has to be at the top of the list that you look up first. And I agree with you. It's an incredible set of circumstances that Mr. Irrelevant is so clearly entrenched as the number one quarterback for this team for this season, coming off of this significant of a surgery, considering who else he's in the back, who else is in that QB room. And the only thing I can really glean from everything I've read and heard behind the scenes is, Shanahan is a guy that develops crushes on certain players because they're doing exactly what he wants to do on the field. And I think to a degree, he must feel like he's using the specific joysticks to tell Purdy to do exactly this, and this. And he's doing, he's executing exactly what he's looking for. And for that reason, he's the guy that he wants out there and trusts to be out there much more so than maybe a guy with a higher ceiling, certainly a higher athletic ceiling, stronger arm, and more mobile, and maybe even adds a little bit more of a wrinkle to your offense. But doesn't matter. If he's not able to do exactly what Kyle Shanahan wants to do when he wants to do it, then he's not as valuable to Kyle Shanahan specifically. And for that reason, he is down, he's slid down the depth chart. I think this is mostly just bad news for Sam Darnold. His comeback player of the year campaign, dead on arrival. And I think realistically, I'm assuming the Niners are not going to incidentally put Purdy in a position where he gets prematurely injured this season. But surely not going to love feeling like, game speed against the Steelers defense. That's a heck of a test week one for a guy who's coming off of this serious injury. So, for me, at least, San Francisco is a wait, is you have to be kind of patient betting this team, because I think Purdy, specifically his health, his performance in week 10 should be substantially, better than it is week one. Let's not forget, he only has 7 starts in his career. So he's continuing to learn on the job in year 2 and should get better as the year goes on. And maybe I'm going to be the one holding the bag here, but I look at this Niners roster top to bottom. It's the best roster in the NFL, in my opinion. This is the number one graded roster for me. It has holes, certainly. It has issues, certainly. But they have, kind of the highest top end talent, assuming that ultimately they get Nick Bosa in the door. But they have top end talent. They have strength everywhere you want strength. And if Purdy ultimately, continues to develop and progress, then with Shanahan, is calling the offense, this is a team that I'm almost certainly going to want to have a Super Bowl future on. I'm just hopeful that we're going to be able to get a better price than 9-1, which is currently available now. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get a better price than 4-1 for the NFC. And one of the reasons that I think it's easy to be so bullish on the Niners is the rest of the NFC West is just so weak. So this Niners team should cakewalk to a home playoff game, if not a 1 seed. And I think the key is just going to be timing our market entry on these guys. And, there's a lot of enthusiasm about Purdy, but what would you put the probability he starts week 1?
I think it has to be pretty high at this point, given all the reporting and the fact that the infatuation with him, frankly. I think I've seen every second of Brock Purdy's career because I was very invested in Kyle Shanahan when he coach of the year, and I was watching every play. And I don't know. I know his PFF grade is great, EPA per play and everything, but geez, he makes some bad throws, Brock Purdy, and occasionally he does look like Mr. Irrelevant, but certainly overall, he was incredible relative to expectations. And I think if you're betting on something, not necessarily Super Bowl, but if you're betting on something like division for the Niners, and there wouldn't be too many straight bets on Niners division at this time of year, but be sure there'd be people parlaying them with other teams. They probably, as far as I can remember, the most insured team against injury in terms of winning a division, just because they could have any one of 3 quarterbacks and still clearly be the best team in the division, I think. Whereas, if you're betting on the Chiefs, Mahomes never really gets hurt, but if he goes down, then all of a sudden the Chargers, I think, are the clear favorite in that division. So I think that is one angle where they do have an incredibly high floor, so long as the health stuff doesn't get too wild. For the true Brock Purdy truthers, he is 40-1 to win MVP, 150-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year. Niners are 3-point favorites at your Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1, total 41.5. All right, let's go to Saquon Barkley, who signed a 1-year, $11 million deal with the New York Giants. I think everyone expected that this would ultimately be the outcome in terms of ways to bet this or take advantage of it. I think the only way for me is looking at Offensive Player of the Year. And if you hunt around, you can find some 50-1, 55-1 on Barkley. And I think all the running backs in this market are just too long. I think the market is too biased by the fact that we've had 3 wide receivers in the past 4 years win, which, I don't think wide receivers are just going to win 75% of the time going forward. I think that running backs, I think the huge part of this award is being seen as, the identity of your offense. Like Michael Thomas was the entirety of the Saints offense in 2019, setting the all-time record for receptions in a season. Cooper Kupp was the Rams MVP candidate over Matthew Stafford, and everyone thinks Justin Jefferson is better than Kirk Cousins. And I think it's, in a way, it's easier for a running back, in a larger sample to be seen as the identity of the team, just because, they have the perception of being a workhorse, of getting 300 plus carries, of, getting close to 2,000 yards. I think that's probably going to happen more for running backs than receivers, just in general. So I think that these guys, like we talked about Derrick Henry, 40-1 being too long for Offensive Player of the Year. Saquon, 55-1. Like Saquon is, I think he's 15-1 to win the rushing title. Saquon Barkley wins the rushing title. He has to be odds on to win Offensive Player of the Year, particularly after this contract stuff and I guess just the narrative around running backs being treated unfairly. I think there'll be such a push to reward, particularly him because he's so beloved. So that would be my way to bet on this news. I don't really see any other way to do so, but what do you make of Saquon back to the Giants?
I don't disagree. The action was, if he actually did hold out, then there was some angles you could really take, because right now with Saquon Barkley, the Giants skill position group is still like mid-20s in the NFL. They have depth, but they have a lot of guys that really just are low ceiling type of players in that room. Maybe the one exception is Darren Waller, but who knows if he can stay healthy. And so I think if you had taken him out of the picture and then that group falls into like bottom 5, all of a sudden there's a ton of pressure on this group as a unit. He's Barkley, to me at least, he's kind of in like a 8 to 10 in terms of like value from among running backs in the NFL, maybe a little bit higher. But his DNA is boom or bust. And if you are a running back that has the potential to make game-breaking plays, then the defense has to prepare for you a little bit differently. And with him out there, the Giants have a little bit more room to scheme Daniel Jones into some of the type of offense that we saw them be so successful in, particularly in the playoffs against the Vikings last year. I mean, that was a lot of that space was created because the defense had to respect the fact that Saquon Barkley was capable of hitting a home run. And now, it's still a team overall that looks pretty fatally flawed at certain positional groups, particularly in the defensive side of the ball for what they want to do from a scheme standpoint. And so if Barkley's out there and he's healthy, then this is a pretty clear over team for me because they're going to give up points, but they have a lot more flexibility in Daboll's scheme and the offense to answer. And so if I was to make any bet on this news, it would probably be over 46.5 on Sunday Night Football week 1, just because the Cowboys are going to get theirs in that game. The secondary for the Giants is far, far, far too weak to keep the Cowboys team into the low 20s, into just a gross grinded out kind of game. And now with their ability to answer, particularly with their ability to create space, get some opportunities to go up against the one weakness in the Cowboys defense, which is their off-ball linebacking core. I think that does actually set up pretty well for this game to go over the 46.5. So that was kind of, I was ready to break hard under if Barkley missed this game. And now with him in the fold and 100% healthy, I think the look is over.
Yep. And to your point about Barkley's health, I think a key thing was just talking about him is that he looked incredible to start the season. He had that 164-yard game against the Titans in week 1, and then he was amazing the first 2 months of the season. He got into like minus 400 to win comeback player of the year. And then he had a month where he just physically didn't look right. Didn't look like the same guy at all. And I think people came off the Barkley bandwagon. And then he had that huge game, I think on Sunday Night Football against the Commanders, where he had the two kind of like LeBron James spin moves on Andre Iguodala in the 2016 finals type of thing, where he was just breaking tackles and he looked like Saquon again. And then he was super efficient to close the season. Any other notes from camp, Drew?
Yeah, a lot of noise. Everybody's in the best shape of their life. Turns out, everybody's making plays. It's a lot of positive buzz. But the two notes that really stood out to me, it looks to me pretty likely that CJ Stroud is going to get the week 1 start for the Texans. Bryce Young going to get the week 1 start for the Panthers. Now, this was kind of expected, but they're getting all of the first team reps. And that's, I think, a pretty clear sign that they are ready to get the week 1 starts. Anthony Richardson still refreshing the Colts beat daily. I mean, it does seem like Gardner Minshew has the playbook a little bit more solidly down. And so, that'll be a pretty clear vote of confidence in Richardson if he gets to start week 1 versus if they want to allow him a couple more weeks to get some reps. So those are the key notes, and just in terms of how many rookies are going to start week 1 in terms of betting the NFL.
Yep. And it looks like as of a couple hours ago, Frank Reich has actually officially tabbed Bryce Young as the starter as expected. And we'll talk about the Panthers in a second in our NFC South preview. But firstly, with the NFL season quickly approaching, now is the perfect time to get your Roto World Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Get ready for your draft and stay one step ahead of your league during the preseason with updated player rankings, profiles, projections, mock drafts, and more. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code DRAFT2023 to save 20% at checkout. All right, NFC South. We'll get to the Panthers momentarily, but let's start off with the New Orleans Saints. They are the favorite to win the division at plus 125, minus 160, make the playoffs, win total 9.5, juiced under 12-1 to win the NFC, 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. One of the stranger teams in football. I think they probably ended last season as the best team in the NFC South, with just how the Bucs had tailed off and the way that defense was playing, the way they took down the Eagles, admittedly with Gardner Minshew, but they were playing at a relatively decent level towards the end of the season. Do you think that the Saints being, pretty aggressively favored in this division is warranted?
I don't. A lot of questions for me about this coaching staff, a lot of questions for me about the roster changes that happened over the offseason, a lot of questions about how the kind of the blue chip players on this roster, how are they going to age, because they are now in that portion of the, of their careers where you're going to start to see some of them decline. And the fact that, the guys that were let walk out the door were sort of the, kind of the developing prospects and the younger players that, the Marcus Davenports didn't ever realize his potential in New Orleans, but, to go to war with this D-line, having lost Onyemata, having lost Davenport, all of a sudden strength turns into a weakness. You're now counting on, DeMario Davis to continue to anchor a defense when he's entering his age 36 season. I don't have his age in front of me, but he's certainly getting up there. And then didn't really do anything to address some of the weaknesses in the secondary. So this was a pretty clear, I thought, top 5 defense on paper last year. And that was really what kept them in games, is their offense was, nothing to write home about. And I have them entering this season as the 22nd best defense on paper, considering the losses in terms of personnel. Offense, I have 19th best. And so in total, I think a lot of things are going to have to go right for these guys to realize their potential as favorites in the NFC South, which means you can kind of take a shot on someone else here at a price, which is where my head is at, really, because the schedule is weak for the Saints, but overall, I don't think people have fully digested some of the losses that they've absorbed across the team here. I also don't grade their offensive line as well as other people are talking about them, which I think pairs poorly with the arrival of Derek Carr, who in general has performed his best with superlative protection. So to me, the Saints are a bet against, at least to start the season.
Yeah, and Derek Carr wasn't very good last year, admittedly not in an amazing context in Las Vegas with a weak offensive line. I think his tackle situation is probably better in New Orleans, but the interior of the line isn't great. I think on defense, one thing is last year, Lattimore was in and out. He didn't really look like himself when he was in. Olave missed time, and he was their best player on offense. Michael Thomas missed, effectively the whole season, as he is prone to do. Just quickly on Michael Thomas, I think he's one of the most, compelling elements of the team, where we forget that the last time that he was fully healthy for a season, which admittedly was a very long time ago, but in 2019, he had over 1,700 yards. He won Offensive Player of the Year. He was by margin the best wide receiver in the game. It seems like he's fully healthy now and is being a full participant in practices. And he's only 30 years old, Michael Thomas. He's the same age as Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. And if he's gotten over his health issues, which, would be a pretty significant dog at this point for him to have done that. But one, I would be looking to bet like alternate overs on Michael Thomas just because of the upside and the scope. If you can, find those markets, I think those are worth a play. Just new quarterback as well creates some upside there. And also, if he's good, and then it's Thomas and Chris Olave, then all of a sudden, I think the whole complexion of the team is different. Because I think Olave is just a superstar. And will be one of the top 10 to 15 wide receivers in the game for a long time. So that's probably the most compelling element to me for the Saints, is what those wide receivers look like. If Carr can get any better than the level he showed last year, I don't think there are really any appealing awards bets around the Saints. Derek Carr will not be winning MVP. Chris Olave will not be winning Offensive Player of the Year, I would think. And then Dennis Allen, 20-1 Coach of the Year. I don't think he can win that unless they get a 1 seed. I don't really want to bet on the Saints to get a 1 seed. Ready to move on to the Falcons?
Yeah, I can't really add anything to that. I agree with your breakdown. I will only say that there's upside here. You have to recognize that. And I'm pessimistic relative to price. That's kind of the key for me.
Yep.
Because if Trevor Penning is a good left tackle and you're giving Derek Carr time, maybe this is an offense that's in the top half of the league, not the bottom. If Michael Thomas is available for the balance of the season, then that he is absolutely going to completely change the complexion of the offense, because I agree Olave is a superstar, and they even have some young players like Rashid Shaheed that are worth mentioning as potential breakouts. So there certainly is an upside here. Not enamored by the coaching staff and what we saw from these guys last year. So that's probably that was sort of the tipping point I needed to just say, look, a lot of availability questions, health, coaching, all of it kind of added up into a stew. You look at them at the top of the division, top of the board, and it's like, this is an easy one that I think you look down the board for a longer shot.
Yeah, and I think that Dennis Allen cost me a lot of money when he lost that 16-3 lead against the Bucs. Had the Saints for the division, had the Panthers for the division also, and he kind of shot those both down with that debacle, losing that game. I think there's just a natural unease and apprehension of betting a team that, I don't know off the top of my head, what are the Saints, like the 17th, 18th best team in football, and betting the 17th, 18th best team in football at plus 125 to win a division just creates some unease, rightfully or wrongly. But let's move on to the Falcons, who in a strange way are kind of an exciting team this season. Win total is under over 8.5. slightly backed to the over plus 120 to make the playoffs, plus 220 to win the division. Most pertinently for this, 28-1 to win the NFC. I don't think they're ready for that. Talk about the Falcons just overall, but I think there are some compelling awards bets around this team. I think Bijan Robinson plus 250. I think that is just largely a bet on health and then no outlier quarterback performance. Like Tyler Algier had 1,035 rushing yards in like a true timeshare with only 210 carries last year. I think that Bijan should smash through that with health and will be, one of the most captivating players in the league. And then we'll get to Arthur Smith, coach of the year, in a second. But what do you make of this team and their chances of winning the division?
Yeah, so I don't have many hot takes in the NFL yet. Market's not stupid. There's a lot of good, everything's priced pretty well. Maybe one of the hottest is I think that this Falcons defense is top 10. Wow. Much in the same way that I don't think people have fully digested the losses to the Saints defense. I don't think they've fully digested how much capital the Falcons have put into their defense, particularly, the doing it in en masse, right? They didn't go out and get a superstar. They didn't get a guy whose name, you're immediately going to recognize as, well, he's obviously a difference maker. They did it by investing in a lot of guys who are just flat out good. And honestly, a lot of the guys that they played a lot of defensive snaps last year were not good. And so there is going to be a meaningful upgrade in this unit overall, like just off the top 6 acquisitions for them in free agency were David Onyemata. He's a plus player. Jesse Bates, he's a plus player for me. Calais Campbell, I still think has gas in the tank as a pass rusher, if not an every down guy, at least a specialist. And Caden Ellis is solid linebacker addition. Bud Dupree, solid linebacker addition, solid pass rusher. And Jeff Okudah, solid addition to put opposite AJ Terrell. Now, any of those guys in a vacuum, not going to move the needle, but I think you've done enough as an overall unit that, combined with, the experience and, familiarity that they have with the new defensive coordinator who they brought over from the Saints, with a lot of these guys that played for the Saints last year, like it all does, looks like synergy to me with this defense. And I think if the defense is top 10, then all of a sudden this NFC South is yours to lose. Because as we know, Arthur Smith can coach an offense built around the running game. And not only does he have a rising player in Tyler Algier, an outstanding offensive line, but as you mentioned, the potential for a rookie breakout season from Bijan Robinson. So, they're, to me at least, and I'll test you on this and you could agree or disagree, I do not think that there is a quarterback in the NFL under less pressure than Desmond Ridder. He literally has is going to be asked to do nothing except for play mistake-free football and let everybody else do their jobs. And this team should win 10 games. Now, if Ridder actually is surprisingly good, which, I'm not willing to put my flag that far with this Falcons team. But, if he shows flashes, if he makes plays, if he develops with the young wide receiver tight end group you got, all of a sudden you could be talking about, a team that could surprise and steal a 1 seed in a week NFC, in my opinion. So I see median expectation for this Falcons team, 9-10 wins, largely based on strength of the defense, strength of the running game. And I think, they're built in a unique way to test sort of what defensive scheme has been trending to in the NFL for a couple of years now. They can kind of specifically attack that well. We saw it last year with Marcus Mariota under center. So this, realistically, with the talent they've added, I think this is the clear bet in this division. And I think there's an upside on this team that people have not gotten to yet.
Yep, I like it. I think the hope with Ridder or Heineke, if that's the situation that evolves, is that Ridder's situation wasn't great last season in terms of what was around him, I think, but there's more scope this year. Offensive line is still excellent, but now you add a weapon in Bijan, Drake London into his second year. Kyle Pitts just has to be better, you would think. And then you hope that Ridder can succeed on more of the Brock Purdy wavelength than having to, take over and, him being the center of the offense. I think to me, the thing about this team is just the schedule. Like their 2 hardest games all season are at Detroit, at the Jets, and then the 3rd hardest game is probably at the Saints, I guess. Jags in London. Like, there's just nothing on this at all. So if they're just if they are the 13th, 14th best team in the NFL, like they might be able to go 12-5, just by virtue of being in this division and being able to play the AFC South on the other side. They're a team that I think is well poised to go on a run. And so we like the Falcons. It's clear we like the Falcons. What is the best way? What is the best way to bet the Falcons? Arthur Smith, 14-1 Coach of the Year. Now, my question to you would be that, like, at what point does Arthur Smith? At what point does the Falcons' record make Arthur Smith favorite over the field to win Coach of the Year? Because I do think there is going to be an element of this division's not very good. They've got an easy schedule. I don't think him going 10-7 and winning the NFC South with that type of record, I don't think that's going to win him Coach of the Year. The other problem that they have is that they don't play in prime time a single time. And so I think I made this 3 out of 10 joke before, but like if a tree falls over in the forest, if Arthur Smith goes 11-6 on the Falcons, does anyone hear it? So I think that is working against him too, but there is a point surely where he will win with a certain record. So what do you reckon that number has to be? Yeah,
it's got to be the 1 seed. And I think to get the 1 seed, you're talking about 11 to 12 wins. I think the NFC is weak enough, and your other. I mean, really, it's Niners versus Falcons. I think for the, if in that world, right? Like, Niners have same sort of thing you're talking about with the Falcons in terms of easy schedule. They have a couple more challenging games, but I think realistically, you need to at least be a top 2 seed, and that's probably going to take 11 wins this year. And I think that's doable, but I also think that. 1 seed NFC may be a better market because you are suffering from exactly what you mentioned. Two huge issues. One is definitely the brand recognition of the Falcons, and Smith himself is an issue. And 2, and I think this actually hurts LaFleur as well. And I know I have bets on him and you do too, but I think there's going to be a bit of a penalty for if those guys do well. People are going to be like, yeah, but the divisions were really weak. Like people are going to hold it against them that, well, yeah, who'd you beat? Like the recognition of an easy schedule could matter for these guys, especially if there's a team in the AFC who pops and they do it against tougher competition. I think that that's probably what you're up against. But no, 14-1. I would price that. I would price shop that against Falcons to get the 1 seed. And then there is certainly a window where the Falcons finish with the 2 seed. People are shocked at how good the team is overall, shocked at how good Ritter is, impressed by a top 5 defense, top 10 defense kind of performance. And then all of a sudden he's your guy. So I need to think about that a little more,
I think they're 16-1 on MGM to get the 1 seed. I'd rather back 14-1 Coach of the Year at that point. If Arthur Smith gets the 1 seed, he takes it out of voters' hands. Then you have to vote for him. I don't think there's really anything realistically that can beat that, unless the Texans go 17-0 or whatever. But I think that he can definitely win as a 2 seed. I think I would make him favorite at 12-5. That's probably what you need to get to, and I think that they're probably shorter than 14-1 to get to 12-5. So I think that 14-1 is not a bad bet when you consider their schedule. And most importantly, there's no star quarterback who's going to take any credit away from Arthur Smith, which is very key for Coach of the Year. All right, before we get to the Panthers, it is a star-studded battle this Sunday on MLB leadoff as Shohei Ohtani and the Angels travel north of the border to face Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Blue Jays. Blue Jays coming off a ridiculous loss to the Dodgers on Tuesday night, blowing a 7-3 lead in the 9th. Find out if there will be fireworks at Rogers Center at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. That is a good one. All right, let's go to the Carolina Panthers. Their win total is 7.5, pretty evenly backed. Plus 165 to make the playoffs. Plus 350 to win the NFC South, 20-1 to get the 1 seed. What do you make of this team? Do you think they have enough upside to win the division?
It's all defensive upside for me. This is an offense that I have huge questions about. you can say the same things about the Falcons and the quarterback situation. Surely, very, very fair to assume that Bryce Young could outperform Desmond Ridder this year. Sure. But the cast of characters that he's working with there, the skill position group in particular, is pretty questionable. I kind of didn't even really understand or respect how important DJ Moore was to the Panthers last year. His usage and his target share were tough. It's tough to wrap your head around how key he was for them and what they wanted to do with their offense. And giving him up in the deal to bring Bryce Young in, I think, is going to have some impact. The swings that they've taken to backfill him, DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, don't move the needle for me. I don't know that either guy is really going to be able to perform above replacement level. Laviska Shenault, I know they've been kind of talking about using him as sort of a jack of all trades, and supplementing the running game around Miles Sanders. But you're going to realistically need either your third year guy in Terrence Marshall Jr. or Jonathan Mingo to completely shock the world and be able to step into that role that DJ Moore has vacated. Because of that, I think that the upside for this Panthers team is capped, despite having a really, really good defense, coordinated by one of the up and coming names in coaching circles, in Ejiro Evero. They have a top tier talent, top tier star power at every level of the defense. Derek Brown is starting to round into a true disruptor on the interior of the defensive line. I like the move to bring in Shai Tuttle, although he's not a guy that moves the needle for anyone else, probably. And Brian Burns, awesome. Shaq Thompson, awesome. JC Horn, high expectations. Von Bell, a nice job taking him away from Cincinnati. Solid, strong safety to put alongside some of these other pieces. Jeremy Chin, I didn't even mention him. He's the most important player in there. Secondary, excited to see what role he has in an Ejiro Evero coordinated defense. So I think this Panthers team is going to hold teams into the low 20s, teens, particularly considering how soft some of their opponents are, and they're just going up against very, very few top tier quarterbacks, and so from a yards per play, from a points conceded, I can see the Panthers finishing the season as high as top 5 defensively with this schedule, which gives them upside, surely. But they're going to need to score into the 20s, and that entirely depends on how Bryce Young fits with this system. They have a lot of really good coordinators in Carolina, so if he surprises to the good, I don't think any of us really should be that shocked. But banking your hopes on a rookie quarterback, I've been burned way too many times in my life to think that this is going to work spectacularly out of the gate, considering what he has to work with in terms of skill position players. So I want to have a bullish feelings about this team overall, because I like so many things that they did in the offseason, but I think we're a year early.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the defense could be awesome with top 5 potential, to your point, just loaded with names and talent. I think also I'm buying Frank Reich stock in generally as someone who had, as we've talked about ad nauseum at this point, 2 years ago, Jonathan Taylor, Offensive Player of the Year, watching every Colts game, couldn't have been more impressed with Frank Reich and his play calling and the scheme and how he was able to hide Carson Wentz and accentuate the strengths of that offense. But I think I just come back to the fact that it's a rookie quarterback with just a receiving core that not only just isn't great on paper, but just doesn't really have much variance. I think just looking at the names, like Adam Thielen just doesn't have variance. There's no real upside at this point. DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall Jr. maybe a little bit more. I mean, they have a good enough offensive line, and bringing in Miles Sanders, who was decent last year. I think that the running game should be okay. And if maybe Bryce Young is better than anticipated, and they find their way to the 20th best offense with the 4th best defense, and that's enough to win the division, I think that's certainly in play. But I don't think this team has the 12 plus win realistic upside that a team like the Falcons has. So in terms of awards bets, Bryce Young plus 450, again, just with the receivers, I just don't really see it. Brian Burns, Defensive Player of the Year, 30-1. I don't think so. Frank Reich, 25-1, Coach of the Year. Reich is a guy who I think that people really like and came off as extremely likable on Hard Knocks and all of that, and is a creative play caller. And also the way that you know that coaches will get Coach of the Year credit is that Indianapolis season in 2021 when they were like 10-5 or 10-6 or whatever going down the stretch. That kind of record, normally you can't win Coach of the Year, but Reich was getting a lot of buzz. And he was never actually going to win, but people were putting him in the top 4, top 5. And so that kind of stuff is an indicator that, the media really likes you. So I think that, if they were to go 12-5, and get a 3 seed, then he could win. But I don't really see that happening at this point.
Yeah. There's one other key wrinkle in that, though, Jay. And that was he was winning down the stretch, and he got where they got because they started quite poorly. And yes. I do not know if this is like actionable signal or noise, but Frank Reich teams, they start poorly. You combine that with a rookie quarterback and roles undefined in the wide receiver room. I am perfectly fine being wait and see entirely about the Carolina Panthers, and I think they are probably going to make a decent bet against early in the season if your quarterback has a pulse.
Yep, I agreed there. All right, let's close out with the only team that we could ever close out with, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their win total is 6.5, backed under, plus 350 to make the playoffs, plus 750. It's a long price in a division like this, but it may be warranted. Plus 750 to win the NFC South, 150-1 to win the Super Bowl. If you'd like to light that money on fire, what do you think of the Bucs? Plus 750. I would always look at the Charlotte Hornets to win the Southeast Division at 50-1 when they were terrible, just because the division is so bad. Any scope for the Bucs?
Not for me. I think the first and foremost thing you think about when you look at a team like the Bucs that's bringing in a quarterback in Baker Mayfield, you try to sell yourself on how will this work, right? Is there upside that the market is missing here? And when I look at you look at skill position first, and you're like, whoa, there's some good wide receivers here. There's some great wide receivers here. You look at scheme second, don't really know what to make of the scheme. And then third, and maybe more importantly for a guy like Baker Mayfield, you look at the offensive line. And the interior of this offensive line was basically their undoing last year. They win the division with 8 wins, which is, in hindsight, still pretty amazing, especially considering some of their absolute fluky wins down the stretch, including the one you mentioned already about this against the Saints. But the interior offensive line, Brady was able to manifest magic in spite of it. By getting the ball out so quickly last year. This has been covered ad nauseum, so I don't need to get into the details. But the idea that Baker Mayfield is going to be able to replicate that in any way with the same sort of performance from the interior offensive line, not buying it, not expecting anything good to happen here. I think if he is under duress early and often, then this offense goes right over the cliff. And if they lose 4 or 5 games in their first 6 or 7, if they lose 6 or 7 games in their first 6 or 7, which is not crazy, then all of a sudden this is a team that is probably selling parts like Mike Evans. Is probably selling parts on the defense. The defense certainly has some star power. The only group that ranks top 10 for me is the linebacking group, and that's obviously not where you want to be the strongest on defense. You'd much rather have a premier pass rush or premier secondary, and I don't rate them either one of those as league top half of the league. So it's a unit that I think can be exploited, can be exposed. They're not going to be able to keep them in games. Todd Bowles is not a guy that I think has long-term stability in Tampa. And so the front office could make a pretty sincere decision at some point during this season that this is a tankathon for our next franchise quarterback. And that's probably the right decision because they're eating a lot of salary this year. They're going to be able to wipe the books in a lot of ways next year. And I think there's certainly pieces to build around on this roster, and it's just a matter of who they elect to keep around. I think in terms of getting turned around quickly in Tampa, but this is a pretty obvious alt under type of team for me.
Yep, and they are plus 850 to have the worst record in the league. Only the Cardinals at plus 225 are shorter. I think that's warranted. To me, it's a massive red flag that as bad as Baker Mayfield looked in Carolina, that Sam Darnold came into that situation and looked a lot better than Mayfield after. I know Mayfield came in late.
Yeah.
And they looked maybe a little bit better on the Rams, but still didn't look great. Though we didn't have much to work with, and it has to be favored that if he wins that job officially, that it has to be favored that he loses that job at some point during the season. I would think, and maybe there's a part of the defense being solid, but I think they're still lacking a little bit for a pass rush, and then offensively, the offensive line is a big concern. Evans and Godwin, I don't think are the guys who they were 2 years ago. And so, I don't expect that, they're very possibly on different teams. All right, and there's no awards bets for this. I can confirm the Todd Bowles.
By the way, I can't play them worst record at that price either.
No,
I have,
get hurt.
I have too many good players. There's just too many good players in this team. They're about the 25th best roster by my ratings.
Yep, I think that's fair. And they play in the NFC South, so they should be able to
that's right.
All right, I'm going to close out. Pivot from the NFC South to the AL East. I want to give out my best baseball bet at the moment. I don't think we've talked about this one yet. It's in the AL Cy Young market, which this is the look, basically, is that I think that's a very uninspiring market at the moment. For some reason, Garrett Cole is plus 160. He's having the 5th best season of his career. His strikeouts are down, walks are up. Underlying numbers aren't great, and he's on a very disappointing Yankees team. Like, I think he should be more like plus 450, plus 500. And in a cluster of the other guys like Valdez, Uvalde, Gosman, McClanahan. I think these are all just kind of the same guy at the moment, with ERAs hovering around 3. They all have their nuanced strengths and weaknesses, but none of these guys are inspiring. And to me, the only inspiring pitcher in the AL right now is Felix Bautista, who's 60-1 on MGM. If you hunt around, I think there's still some 100-1 available. And let me make the case to you, Drew.
Okay.
He's leading the league in saves right now with 28. He's got a .92 ERA, and the key is he is striking out 18 guys per 9. So it's 2 strikeouts per inning. The mountain is out of his mind. For guys with more than 40 innings in the AL, he ranks first in ERA, first in WHIP, first in K rate, first in FIP, and the key to me is win probability added. He has added, in terms of win probability, 3.7 wins to Baltimore. No other player in the AL, no other pitcher has added more than 2.7. So he is the key best performer in high leverage moments who has shifted win probability more than any pitcher in the AL. I just think the idea of giving Cy Young to Garrett Cole versus rewarding Bautista, who is having an outlier great reliever season on a team right now that is the best story in baseball, the Orioles, who have the best record in the American League. Like, voters have to feel good about their vote. Here's the other thing with baseball. It's not like the NBA or NFL where everyone votes for every award. In baseball, you generally only get 1 award to vote for, max 2. So I think you just pay more attention to your vote, and you have to feel good about it. And right now, Felix Bautista is the only guy I think you can feel really good about. And obviously, it could all blow up. He give up 3 runs his next inning, and all of a sudden he's in big trouble. But I think if he keeps his ERA under 1, leads the league in saves, gets his WAR to around 5, which is in the realms of possibility, then all of a sudden, I think he's very live to be the first closer since Eric Gagne in 2003 to win this. Zach Britton in 2006 was right in the mix, and I know he had a .54 ERA. He was dominant, but he wasn't the same. It wasn't the same level of dominance as Bautista. Bautista just it's just insane. I've never seen a pitcher make hitters look more helpless than Bautista does, and I think that stuff matters, where no one thought Zach Britton was the best pitcher in baseball. They might think that Felix Bautista is the best pitcher. I think that with the win probability stuff and the high leverage stuff, I think I might vote for him today, honestly. Remove all bets out of it. I think he might be the most deserving candidate, and he's 60-1 to 100-1. So what do you think? Felix Bautista, AL Cy Young.
So the funny thing is, in our show prep, I knew this was the market you were looking at. And so I went to Fangraphs and I clicked starters and went through the advanced stats, and I'm going through everything. I'm like, man, I have no idea. These are all super uninspiring candidates. So the fact that you came in with a closer surprised me. And I think that makes sense. I mean, none of these starters are having standout campaigns. And the idea of giving it to Garrett Cole and the Yankees, considering what this team is doing, not something that I would buy into at all. The win probability added that you mentioned is pretty notable. Like, wow, he is head and shoulders above the rest of these guys in the AL in terms of pitching. There really is not another good case. So I think really what we need to do is start hyping this, because no one's buzzing about this, Jay. But once they do, he needs a campaign. He needs people to start talking about this. Bautista is a serious candidate for Cy Young. Let's start beating the drum. We'll close the show with it every day from now until football season, and then we'll make it a reality.
Yeah, this is a mountain podcast right now. That's the other great thing. He's got the nickname, the Mountain. Just love it. He's also just the best watch in baseball at the moment. He's striking out 18 guys per 9. I think Spencer Strider's at 14. Like, he's insane. You watch his splitter. It's the most unhittable pitch in baseball. At least It looks like it to me. I haven't studied the numbers there. But I think the Bautista, I think he is very live. And to me, it just comes back to when there are uninspiring fields, that's when outliers emerge, and people have to feel good about their vote. That's why Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year, because it was a weak field and people wanted to reward the best team and feel good about their vote. And he was the best candidate for that. And I think there is very clearly a path for Bautista to be the best candidate that people consider at the end of the season. So there we go. Felix Bautista. What a great way to close off our NFC South preview with the great Mountain. All right, don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you next week.